Starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and gray. Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hills, sketch the trees and the daffodils, catch the breeze and the winter chills in colors on the snowy linen land.
Hi, Terri.
Hi,
You look lovely when we couldn't hear a word you were saying.
The camera loves Terri.
Yeah,
like
you do look good.
It's like,
I mean,
it's like painting itself. You know?
Okay. So,
thanks, Phil.
It's like Mona Lisa.
Over the top.
So, go ahead.
Welcome again to YUH with Lisa, Phil, and Aaron. This week, our guest is Mandy Theis.
Okay.
We should say that Mandy is the director of the School of Atelier Arts. Did I say that right?
You're pretty close. Atelier.
Atelier. Okay. Now, I have no idea what that means, really. I've kind of peeked online, but I still am unsure.
Yeah, well, you're not alone. It's actually a French word and it means studio. And why are a bunch of Americans using this silly French word or, funny to pronounce French word? And it's because at the turn of the last century, a lot of Americans were sending artists to Paris to get the training so that they could have portrait painters at a higher level back in the States. So actually, Cincinnati was one of the main cities sending painters to both Paris and in Munich to train these artists to be able to paint and draw realistically so they could come back and make portraits for the wealthy patrons in those cities.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
All right.
That's good background. Also, the president of Da Vinci Initiative.
Yes. So I'm actually no longer involved with that organization, but it was one of my past lives where I was bringing this type of training to classrooms all over the country. I still do similar work with the School of Atelier Arts, which is the organization I now run.
Okay.
Okay. And we're kind of interested in, of course, a little bit of background, and maybe if you want to talk about it, how 2020 changed your career trajectory. But because I know a lot of people are still interested in all that 2020 stuff.
Sure.
But what would you like to focus on?
So, my passion is just sharing about this training, like I said, and that we discovered it early on. It's not something that a lot of people are aware still exists. It's something that we think happened in the past, and we don't necessarily know where to go today. Like if you want to be a professional portrait painter, where do you go to get your training today? So I really like to share about how anybody can learn how to draw and paint that goes to places that have the skill set, and that the places that have the skill set are kind of hard to find because they almost didn't survive the last century, but they still exist and you can go to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you do some online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
come to you for training online.
So before 2020,
huh?
Yeah, so I was running an in-person studio, like many people were, teaching these atelier skills. And then, of course, quarantine hit. And like many people, I was like, no, I can't teach how to paint online. It's going to be too hard. And, if I can't be there and help the students mix the paint, how are they going to learn? But of course, when you're forced to do something, you figure it out. And I've been pleasantly surprised to learn that my students are actually getting better faster online than they were in person because they're hearing all these other critiques of these other students, and they're actually avoiding mistakes that they might have otherwise made because of this online training and how it gives them more opportunities to, listen in and learn from each other.
That's interesting. The video versus live, teaching in live.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do a little bit of both. So I have pre-recorded lessons with like the stuff that I teach again and again and again. And, Terri, as a educator yourself, I'm sure you teach the
Mhm.
same lesson multiple times, in a day.
Almost.
So, the core lessons for teaching people how to paint, like where does the paint go on your palette? How do you mix with a palette knife? Those types of things, are pre-recorded videos. But then twice a week, what I do is I have students show up together in a group call, and we look at the paintings that they have in progress, and we talk about some of the mistakes they're making, and what things to avoid. And what I really love is sometimes a student will paint something like too dark in value, and in the very same critique session somebody's painting too light, and then they can both see what those extremes are and really help them get it accurate.
Right.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the basics of like how to put paint on a palette.
Yes.
This is a paintbrush.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, is a lot of this knowledge got lost. And, I'm sure Terri could speak to this. We often, in my experience, I'm a licensed art teacher. I've worked in 20 states with art teachers at their art education conferences, teaching skills to art teachers all over the country. And very few of them actually teach oil painting in the classroom because there's so much bad information out there, and a lot of like fears that it's too expensive or it's not safe or these things. But it's actually just a lot of misinformation because we discontinued teaching this particular content. And it's not so scary, and it's not so hard, and there is a right and wrong way to do it, and it's much more accessible. And I start all of my teaching and all of my training at the very, very beginning, because people come to me from all over the place. So, some have been painting for years, some just really, really have always wanted to paint. They became a doctor instead, and now they're like ready to like pursue their life's passion, which they really wanted to do from the start, but they know nothing about painting. And so I'm very careful in my instruction to make sure that everybody meet people where they are, like, and so, being very specific about all the things. And, even experienced painters, I've discovered, like, are holding their palette upside down. Like, who knew there was a right and a wrong side to a palette? But once you know the right side, then it's much more comfortable to hold a palette, right? So I try to be very, thorough in the instructions, and cover, anytime I get asked a question multiple times, it gets covered in a little mini video lesson, like we're going to cover it.
Right. Well,
It has always surprised me at the amount of doctors that I've had as students, that
Sure.
in the art classes after they've retired. Yeah, they're always old. They're retired doctors. It's always surprised me. There's one other, and beauticians.
Mm-hmm.
I had a wonderful class one time that were men and women doctors sprinkled in with a bunch of beauticians, hairdressers.
Yeah, it's very common. It's funny because I was telling my dentist about what I did one time, and he was like, "Oh, how do I sign up for an art class?" And I'm like, but I think some people, they feel like they have to choose between a career that's going to pay well and being a poor, starving artist. But that's really an outmoded idea. Like, a lot of the people that have atelier training and atelier skills, I have an acquaintance who works for NASA and paints portraits of astronauts. Like, she works for NASA. Like, there's
That's
so
cool.
many careers out there
something
when
you
you
don't wanna
actually
limit.
have a high level of technical skills.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's something where you don't want to limit a person to a single path.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was reading that millennials on average are going to have like 3 careers over the course of their life. I'm trying to remember where, but yeah, it tracks because the world's just changing so fast, and there's more opportunities, and people are hearing, for example, today, people listening to your podcast are like, "Oh, you can be a portrait painter for a living." Maybe that's not something that it occurred to them before.
And
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that the millennial attitude of not taking crap from the boss, it's true.
Oh, it's totally true.
And a big part of that is they know they're not going to be in that job for 30 years. So why should they bother to be miserable?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and
unlike us that stuck it out.
Yes. Well, I think about like the teaching profession, right? It's unionized, and I'm appreciative that there's some things that the unions that I've been involved with have fought for. But also, when you're a first year teacher, I made $20,000 at my first teaching job a year. I made more waitressing than I did teaching. And, what happens is that as you go up the pay scale, like the jumps become bigger and bigger, but you have to be in the profession for so many years before you can like afford to live off of, a teaching salary. And so I think younger people are like, I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to make up my own business, or I'm going to go be a portrait painter for NASA, or whatever it may be. Just kind of going around that.
A quality server definitely makes more than, say, office worker. But I stayed in my job, which doesn't pay as much, so my IT professional husband could move up the ladder.
Yes.
I'm no dummy.
I'm still on the bottom rung.
I bought him cheap, and now I'm not going to sell him high.
I like that attitude.
But so like almost all retirement homes do art shows, right? I mean,
yes, many of them do.
A lot of people find this this vocation or this hobby later in life. What's the legend of Grandma Moses? How
it's a profession that's safe from being taken over by AI also.
Maybe.
Yeah, that I worry about because
your strokes are too thick.
No, they're doing the paintings.
Bleep bloop.
For those just now joining us, we are talking about art. People, stop the dirty mind.
Talking about art.
Yes.
With
I think
paint strokes.
Yes. I think it's similar to when, there was this big panic over photography at the turn of the last century, right? Like, is it going to make artists obsolete? But the same is true with AI as was true with photography, like crap in, crap out, right? And AI is only as good as its source material.
The cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
It also forces, I think art is, in my mind, it's due for another door to get knocked down and opened up as far as the actual artist doing, to stay ahead of AI and to find a new what would be the right way? The cliche is like the impression.
New outlet, a new channel.
Yeah. What's that?
A new outlet or a new channel?
A new door that opens up, like during the Impressionist era. That's one everyone knows, that all of a sudden there was a big intense study of light, the whole movement. And I think we're due for another big movement. That's what kept art in front of the photography back then, or separated the two. And I think that's what's going to be needed to separate it from the AI movement of artificial art. Let's call it that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Terri. Art, people think that art isn't related to scientific discovery, but it has always been intertwined with scientific discovery. And, Impressionism was absolutely what Terri's saying. It was about light, but also what happened at the same time is cadmiums were invented. All of a sudden we had pigments that were more intense than any pigment the artist had before. So instead of trying to recreate a scene by using, if you're trying to paint a red flower and your paint isn't red enough, like you have to compromise, right? But all of a sudden painters had a pigment that could actually replicate what they were seeing at the same intensity level. And it changed, the way painters were thinking about art, and they were especially encouraged to follow that path while photography was stuck in black and white land,
Yeah. Didn't Da Vinci dissect corpses to figure out how better to draw muscular
yeah. It was illegal to dissect them, and he would pull them out of the river because for whatever reason, I guess there were bodies in rivers. I definitely did that, but
they pile up, I guess.
As one does, as one pulls dead people out of the river.
Is that, right?
It was a whole black market.
Need a body. I'll grab a sack. Let's go to the river.
Right. Well, they were also, artists would bribe individuals for access to bodies, especially criminal bodies, that were not going to be looked after too closely. So there were lots of ways, but there's definitely an intense interest in anatomy, and a lot of what we understand about the internal workings of the human body that are essential to medicine came from artists like Da Vinci.
Yeah. Wasn't art, I mean, the beauty of art comes in its perfection and the signature of the artist, right? I mean, that's going to be the final frontier for AI. I mean, it's going to have to be able, that's where it's going to have to be able to create.
It's going to have to jump that rope
rather than recreate art.
Oh, I was saying that teaching painting would be tough for AI, but making its own art, that's another. Yeah, that's the garbage in, garbage out again.
Yeah. Well, and it matters how it's programmed too. Like people think, they'll look at my artwork, like this drawing behind me, and say, oh, that looks just like a photograph. And, they intend it as a compliment, but it's actually a grave insult to an atelier trained artist to be told that, because a photograph sees something and it takes a three-dimensional world, which is massive amounts of information, and it translates it into something that's 2D. And it does that in a very specific mechanical way. But what atelier trained artists do is they're taking that same amount of information, but they're weeding out different parts of it, right? So, they're emphasizing certain things. They're not just copying what they see the way a camera does. They are like, okay, I want to have a great light effect on this side of the face, which means I'm going to purposely lighten beyond what I see, beyond what I observe, to create this great like splash of light on that part of my face. And those are decisions that cameras can't necessarily make. Photographers can of course edit in the darkroom, but that requires training and knowledge on their part, right, to create those same choices. And not only that, but once you're editing something that's already translated to 2D, you don't even know what information has been cut out, right? It's no longer a choice for you to make some of the choices that an artist makes when they're looking at a three-dimensional object and drawing and painting it.
Yeah. I think they mean by the compliment that it looks so realistic.
Yes.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting.
My understanding, portraiture is supposed to be at least somewhat realistic.
Yeah, well, you certainly want a likeness, but the likeness doesn't come from what people think it comes from. So, for example, if you ask someone...
I mean, for example, if I drew a face, it wouldn't look as realistic as the face that you have drawn.
I mean, it could. It depends what your training is.
It could, but I mean, with no training,
I would argue
or aptitude, it would not.
I could bet you that within an hour you could make a sketch that was representational of a specific human that you were trying to achieve with a portrait. And the reason for this is because a likeness of a portrait doesn't come because someone's eyes are blue or something, like those are little details. Those are irrelevant. We can recognize our BFF all the way across the football field before we ever see the color of their eyes. And the reason for that is that your brow ridge casts a shadow on your eyes, your nose casts a shadow on your face, and your lips cast two shadows on your face. And it's the pattern of those darks against the light that create a likeness. The most important thing about getting a likeness in a portrait is the relationship of those things to each other. And if you just made a scribble for the eyes, a scribble underneath the nose, and two scribbles for the lips, and they were in the right relationship to each other, you could get a likeness of my face with scribbles.
Interesting. Let's do that. Go.
Yeah. Get your pens out of it.
I do enjoy it.
You to try it.
At Disney's California Adventure, they have
early.
They have little like 15-minute classes where they teach you to draw a character. Somebody's up leading the class, and you usually start with a circle and build out from there.
I think that the biggest crime of the last century was that modern art became really focused on do what you feel and be creative and it's not that I don't believe in those things. I do believe in creativity and emotional expression, but it created this disconnect that you either have art or you don't. You either get bopped on the head by a talent fairy or you'll never have it. And technical art like a realistic drawing is absolutely a learned skill. Anybody can learn it just like people learn how to read. It's just that they don't necessarily have access to that information. It's not broadly available.
Yeah. There's one last thing I want to say about or think about AI, and that's isn't there something psychological about the idea that the piece that you're looking at on the other side of that piece is a person, is an individual who's had a life experience, who may have a physical debility that affects their that alters their work.
A person real or imagined, right?
And if you don't know, real or imagined, if you know that it was produced artificially, that would take the soul right out of the, that's something that'll never be able to be usurped, I don't think.
And you can decipher that, the absence of that soul, when you look at a piece of AI art. It's lacking something. It's
right now it messes up fingers famously, right?
How does it finger? Oh yeah, I have seen that. Yeah.
Well, you know how we said like crap in, crap out? Rembrandt can draw hands to save his life, right? And what are they drawing on to create this AI image paintings and drawings? Like, I hope it's not Rembrandt's hands.
Yeah.
To be dropping his coffee all the time, or what?
Hon, grab your sister's picture.
Oh yeah.
We brought out some of the family art. This is a piece that Terri sent to Philip as a gift.
I love this.
So it's a mixed media. It's I believe, am I right? It's oil painting and then like cloth.
I better describe it.
Much better.
It's oil paint on sanded silk. I take silk and apply it with gesso to the canvas, and then ooch it around, let that dry, and then do my sketch on top of the wrinkles that form in it, and then do my painting on top of that. So it's like the base. Cool. Yeah, I haven't been doing many of those lately. I went through a spell where I explored that whole style for about a year, and I think it ran its course in my in my patience.
Yes.
I'm over that now. Let's find something else, some other way to work.
I feel you. I was like really into pastels for a year, and then I haven't touched them since. I just got over it.
Isn't that funny? It's funny how that works. I did pastels for a while when my daughter when she was first born and toddling around, because I could slide the whole tray up on top of the refrigerator. And pull it right back down and go back to work, and keep her out of the toxic chemicals and the paint and out of my stuff.
I have a friend that switched to pastels because her cat loved to walk on her palette. And she's like, I just can't paint with oils at my house.
Kind of the same scenario.
Kids, cats, same thing.
Woke up one morning and the cat had knocked over a can of house paint down in the basement, and there was cat tracks all the way up the steps.
All over the house.
Yeah. But,
classic.
So
do you ever feel like you're living in a cartoon?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you got to leave those, right?
right. Speaking of meat, you mentioned oil. Do you basically
to talk him into leaving the prints? But
do you mostly do work with oils, or do you do watercolors, mixed media type stuff?
Primarily oil. Actually, there's a drawing behind me here, and it's kind of a fun story. It's for those of you who are listening at home, it's a drawing of a plaster cast of a sculpture that's fairly well known called the Nubian Man. And my students, I was teaching them, and I was in this drawing workshop, and they just kept obsessing. They're like, do I have the right pencil, Mandy? Do I have the right pencil? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. They're like, but what about this pencil, Mandy? I'm like, would you stop it? It doesn't matter. What matters is how well your eye is trained. You can draw with a crayon if you want to. And of course, she turned around to me and said, prove it. And so this drawing behind me is actually a crayon drawing. I did that entirely with Crayola crayons. I mean, to be fair, like 100 Crayola crayons, because it took a lot of time to do it. But if you look on my Instagram at Mandy Fine Artist, you can see a detail of this drawing, and you can see that it's actually done with crayon. So
very cool.
I don't get like too hung up on media. I don't think it's about the media. It's about how much time and training you put into your eye and how well you can see. Because someone that can see more than you can actually teach you to see colors you've never seen before, can teach you to see like nuance of detail you've never seen before, can teach you to see shape you've never seen before. It's pretty incredible, like what atelier training can do for your eyes.
Now, I kind of get what they were saying. It's not so much, is this the right pencil, but the quality, you know?
Yeah.
Because like you say, I mean, Crayola crayon. I use generic crayon. It is not the same.
I agree with you, but even if you have the crappy crayon that has like all wax and almost no pigment in it, it may shorten the range of values that you can get. You're not going to be able to get as black, on your drawing with a low grade crayon. But if you know what you're doing, and if you have a lot of control of your materials and your eye is trained well, then you'll create what's called a high key drawing. So yeah, the darks won't be that dark, but the image will still read clean, even with a crappy crayon.
Yeah. Cool. We're speaking with Mandy Theis.
Theis.
It's that German pronunciation gets people every time.
Right.
Theis.
And we're talking about atelier arts and just art in general. We're having a good time here. So I was wondering, you have certain techniques.
Stumbling over a German name and a French word.
We're just going to throw in all the European stuff.
Welcome to Cincinnati.
I have enough trouble with English,
I love it.
You do fine.
We saw a couple of YouTubes, in the short time we had to prepare for this, and you had some techniques that you used. We watched one where you used a box to get the dimensions of a
rose,
of a still life, right, and everything like that. So, what are some of your students? Are K to 12, right?
Yep. So I have taught kindergarten through 12th grade in the public school system. I currently now teach teens and adults in my online studio. I don't teach in the public school system currently. But anybody, like if you ask anybody, like kids love drawing, even little kids, and they can learn so much about drawing realistically with just a tiny bit of guidance. So, something I would do with my kindergartners is, I'd ask them, okay, draw an apple to the best of your ability, right? And they'd all draw usually like a ball with like a stick on top, right? And then I'd be like, okay, we're going to try to draw this apple. And I'd hold an apple out in front of them. And I'd ask them, is this apple taller or wider? And, I'd try to pick a really obvious example, so it was either super tall or super wide. And they would tell me taller. And I'll be like, okay, now draw an apple that's taller than it is wide. And so they'd still be drawing their circles with their sticks, but this time they'd be thinking about the proportion, right? And so you can guide them step by step like that to practice seeing and practice their observational skills in a way that they're very capable of learning and very capable of doing.
Who are some of your favorite inspirations? Are there any contemporary artists or artists from
certainly
that really serve as an inspiration to you?
Certainly. So Julia Aristides is an artist that I trained with in Seattle, Washington, and she has some of the best books out on atelier training. So if it's something you're curious about, or if this is resonating with you, I strongly encourage to look her up. So I'm obviously
spelling your last name.
Yeah, it's Arist. I have to think about it in my head. Let me type it out and then I'll say it. I can't think that many. All right, so it's Aristides. Aristides. So that's Julia Aristides. Also, Sadie Valeri is an amazing, incredible realist artist. Ricky Mujica, he trained with Max Ginsberg in the New York City School. He's an amazing portraitist. You'll actually see a lot of his work in movies. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like some horror film that just came out, and there was a backstory where the kid was an artist, and my friend Ricky did all the paintings for the background for it. Right. So again, there's careers with atelier training, right? There's a lot of them out there. He paints paintings for horror movies. That's a job that he does. That's a real job out there.
The eyeballs follow you as you go across the room.
Yeah, I don't know the details. I personally, if I watch a horror movie, I'll have nightmares for years. I've only ever seen one when I was 17, and I still have nightmares from it. So I just can't. I can't look. The Exorcist.
Yeah, that'll
do it to you.
Yeah, not only was it The Exorcist, but I was living in Georgetown at the time because we had moved when I was in high school to the DC area, which in the house that it supposedly happened in, because it was based on a real story, and they were doing a special screening when they re-released it in this house. And my friends were like, "Do you want to go see this movie?" And I knew nothing about it. And then I saw this awful, terrifying movie in the house that it supposedly happened, and I just have not gotten over it.
Well, that's a special codicil.
That's special circumstances. You know, that's
I mean, had you seen it in like the theater?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did put up a big screen in the house.
It was a big screen, but not in.
Yeah.
But
I'm not a fan of horror films either, really.
I love them. I mean, but I'm constantly trying to find one that'll scare me. I'm never scared by any of them.
You're just always so dumb.
Go watch The Exorcist in DC.
Well, I've seen The Exorcist, and I was going to say the neighbor, Terri knows our neighbor, the Hoffmans. One of the women, I guess the mom or somebody, told me a ghost story about it and how, you know, really built up my expectations for it. So that when I saw it, I was already, you know, with the credits started, I was already like out of my seat, you know.
Oh,
yeah. When I saw The Exorcist, I will say it was on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon TV.
Oh,
so not the same impact.
Not as scary on a Saturday afternoon.
I kind of was exposed to some horror before that, so
Terri
it wasn't like, you know, the beginning for me.
Terri just did a horror movie marathon a couple weekends ago with her
kids. With the grandkids.
Yeah, the grandkids. Was it Halloween night? No, it was Halloween weekend before weekend before Halloween, and we just camped out and marathoned on all those old ones like you know, Jason and I can't even remember them all.
Your grandkids are way braver than I am. Way braver.
Well, the older one is 16, and is Cash 13 yet?
Yeah, he's 13. So they're kind of older.
I think the brave people are the ones raising two teenagers.
I have a ghost in my lava lamp tonight. It keeps turning itself on and off.
Well, I mean, that seems like a friendly ghost, like if they're into lava lamps.
Yeah, right.
That's the sort of mayhem your ghost is into.
Keeps turning it off, though.
Yeah, until your house starts burning down.
But, you know,
go ahead, Terri.
I was just going to say that I think maybe the reason horror movies are so challenging for me is because I'm just such a visually trained and oriented person, right? And like my dreams are so vivid. And so when I have these nightmares about these, like they feel so real to me, you know, and I think it just makes it challenging.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now.
And I don't remember my dreams, so that might help.
There's not a lot of good horror. I mean, I really like good suspenseful horror movies, you know, like Alfred Hitchcock and that's going way back. But anyway, I was wondering, so you lived in Dayton.
I did. I grew up there.
It's a great town. It's a great town, but it's not considered like an art mecca. I mean, so now you find yourself in New York, which like
musically it is.
Yeah. Well, you know, I have to say the Dayton Art Institute is amazing. It has such good art in there. And a lot of the Midwestern cities, Cincinnati does. Cincinnati has an amazing Duvenet collection. You know, there's a lot of great art in the Midwest because they had all the money when Europe was poor. And they bought all these old masterworks from like the bankrupted people in Europe after World War II at a time when there was a lot of money in the Midwest. And so the Midwest museums have incredible art collections, like even those smaller cities. The Dayton Art Institute has an incredible art collection. And in fact, I have to credit the Dayton Art Institute for my career as an artist because we went as a field trip there when I was in second grade. And I saw this Italian painting at the time, and I didn't know that it was possible. It was like being told you could be an astronaut, right? Like people actually can paint like this. It was something that I'd always wanted, and my heart had always wanted, but I had never seen a real painting before, you know. And as like I asked the curator so many questions because I didn't believe that a person painted it, right? I thought it was like a TV or something, and like, you mean there was paint there, and the person painted it, and ever since then, I wanted to be able to paint like that, like my whole life. But what kind of happened is, you know, I kept trying to paint like that, but the teachers I had didn't have those skills. So I was, as much as I worked at art and I did all these projects in art, like I wasn't getting closer to that ideal I had in my head. And at some point I thought that I just didn't have it, that like I wasn't born with it or something. And so when I discovered in my 20s that atelier training actually existed and that you could paint like that, you just have to go to this magical Hogwarts school called an atelier. And if you just work really hard, you can learn to draw and paint at the same level as these old masters. It was like being told I was 25 and yes, you can be an astronaut and you can, whatever your childhood dream is. So Dayton holds a really special place in my heart. I love the Dayton Arts Institute. I think it's one of the most beautiful museums of all the museums. I think it's more beautiful than the Met, and you can tell any New Yorker I said that.
Oh, yeah, strong words.
Yeah. Them's fighting words in New York.
Do we still have a New Yorker?
A New York.
In our social,
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, most New Yorkers are transplants, though, right? At least ones in like Manhattan and stuff. But
not
that's I'm taking that mostly
percentage of transplant than in other cities. I'm sure.
Right. That's a broad statement. Cincinnati has some good art outlet. You got the Taft Museum. The Contemporary Art Center,
right? The Cincinnati Art Museum.
The exhibits that come through there.
There used to be a ton of galleries downtown also that were really nice. And I don't know if they're still there or as many of them. But
there aren't as many, but they still exist.
We latched onto them in high school, in our high school days, when we were too young to get in bars. We scoured the newspapers for art openings down in the downtown galleries.
Classic.
Yeah, we were down there for the wine and hanging out, and that was fun.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a time,
that's really smart.
Yeah.
I wish I'd hung out with more art people. Not that I like wine, but that's beside.
There was a time in my atelier training, because I left my teaching career to get the atelier training at the time that you had to move across the country. In this case, I moved to Seattle to train full time in an atelier, and I give up my job. I was back waitressing again, and paying thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket for tuition because there's no student loans for this type of training. And there were quite a few art openings where there were doggy bags.
Costs a lot to live in Seattle too.
Plastic wine purses.
Did you go from Dayton to Seattle?
It'd be like the 80-year-old woman with the big purse and then the 20-something student with the big purse. And you'd both be going for the shrimp. It'd be a knockdown, drag out.
Yeah. So back to where all the places I've lived. So I kind of had a meandering life since I left Ohio. So I've lived in Ohio longer than any other place. So I lived there until I was 16. I moved to DC when my parents moved us there when I was 16, graduated high school there, went to college on a whim in Montana, lived there for another 8 to 10 years, depending on how you want to count it. I started atelier training in the Carolinas and then Salt Lake City, and then landed in Seattle and did 4 years of training there, then moved to New Hampshire to train with another atelier trained person, and then landed in the New York City area. So that's the adventures of Mandy.
Popped all over the states.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting just culturally how different areas of the country are. Like when I first moved to New York City, I was like, why is everybody yelling at me all the time? Just the regular volume is
a loud city. You gotta be loud.
It is.
You have to be heard above everything else.
Right.
Yeah. But then in
podcast
Seattle,
friends has a term, uncultured swine. So if you lived anywhere where it's just uncultured swine, nobody has any appreciation for art. They're all,
It's a Toy Story reference, I think.
Oh,
is it?
Classic.
Okay.
Yeah. No matter where I go though, there's a love of art. Like Montanans, I taught in this rural school in Montana. I was their art teacher, K-12, and my first day teaching there, they were like, "Oh, by the way, you're the music teacher too." And there were 100 kids in this school, and it was the school for 3 towns around, and it was the only school for 60 miles or something. It was crazy.
Were you did you play any instruments or have any musical background?
My mother's a music teacher. Oh, yes. My mother's a music teacher, so I wasn't completely out of the dark, but I certainly didn't feel qualified to be a music teacher. That's not what I went to school for or had prepared for, going into my first teaching job. but there was so much love of the arts there, you know, like so much appreciation because, you know, there weren't so many people making art. So if you made anything, it was maybe like you got so much praise for it, right? Because no one else was making anything, you know, at that time. So there was like a love and appreciation in a small town that you don't find in other places. And I think actually that encouragement really helped me in my career. And I have a great love for tiny towns like that.
What are your thoughts on Bob Ross? What do you think his technique?
I love Bob Ross, and this is an unpopular Atelier opinion. The Atelier people are going to get their pitchforks out, possibly. But I love Bob Ross because he did something that no one else was willing to do, which is to say, you can learn how to paint and with access to knowledge, and here's some knowledge, and you can paint, and you can create something that you're proud of, and that brings you joy. And I think that's glorious. And I think that's widely missing from like the modern art community, where it's like, oh, if you don't understand why this white canvas is so deep and meaningful, then you're just an idiot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was like a ASMR superstar long before anybody even knew what that was, right? I mean, people loved to watch his show just for the
calmness of it.
His voice.
Oh yeah. I mean, painting is the ultimate, like, well, it's both the most frustrating thing I've ever done and the most flow thing.
Some fluffy clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But like, once you learn some skills, you can have so much joy and flow and peace in the painting process, you know. But it's really frustrating when you're trying to create a happy little tree and you don't know how. But Bob Ross taught people how to do that, you know, and people had success, you know, learning from him. And I have so much admiration.
Zen place that he reaches when he's talking about it too.
Yeah. Well, and I love how he would just like last minute, there'd be like 30 seconds left in the episode. He's like, let's throw in another tree. And you could see his producer sometimes like slightly off stage be like, ah,
doing the cut sign.
Yeah.
He was just messing with the producer.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. But it's like one of my favorite things. But I'm actually also a huge fan of, oh my God, why can't I think of his name? The painter of light, Thomas Kincaid. Right. So also somebody that gets a lot of hate, right? Especially from the modern art world, but he had skills. He was a multi-billion-dollar painter. He was the first artist traded on the stock market for billions, $6 billion.
So quit hating.
It quit hating. And also why was he worth that much? Because what he painted resonated with people, right? Like if you ask anybody off the street, like name 3 movie stars, like most people can name 3 movie stars or 3 bands that they like, but ask them to name 3 of the most famous living painters today, and most people don't know Damien Hirst or Jeff Koons or, you know, like, because they're not making art that matters to anybody. Like, but people know who Thomas Kincaid is because he made art that mattered to everyday people, that resonated with everyday people. And I don't think you can be a greater artist than that, even if his paintings were a little saccharine for my personal taste, like, you know,
right. It's not going to hang in my house.
Yeah.
but
I'm not putting it down. Because it was quality. I mean, it looked good. He
had technical skills. Yeah. And you know what? When you looked at his little cabin on a snowy hill with the light coming out of it, like it made you feel good. Like, why wouldn't you want that in your house?
Yeah. Well, so you talk about these techniques that gifted teachers can impart to their students, where they can get a firm grasp of a foundation of being able to do artwork. Is there any, I'll ask Terri first, is there any part of your hobby or your vocation, Terri, that has frustrated you, that you really feel like you've not been able to perfect, and you're thinking, I want to be able to do this on a palette, and I've just not been able to do it to date?
I don't think with those limitations, I'll do what I want to do, and if it's not going the way that I want it to go or whatever, I kind of let it paint itself. And usually when I let go of the control of what I'm doing, then it happens and it works.
That's why I'm not good at art.
And But not every painting is like that. Some of them you have to have more control with. I have been enjoying playing since a lot with work, like the whole series or the year that I spent doing the sanded canvas ones. That I found great pleasure in that because it was more like playing, and it was like doing the commissions and stuff.
Oh, commissions. Oh, yeah.
They're horrid. And you have to paint or they expect you to come up with what is in their head because they can't paint it. So they want you to paint it, but I can't see it in your head.
It's so true. It's so true. So Terri, I have to share a story with you. So when I first graduated from atelier training, I had painted some flowers, these peonies, it was like a small painting. And for whatever reason, just like a lot of people wanted to buy that painting, but I only had the one painting. So then they were like, okay, well, will you paint another painting of peonies? So I painted another one, and then people saw that one and they wanted more peonies, right? And I spent 2 years of my life painting nothing but peonies. I call it my peony purgatory period. I still to this day cannot even stand the smell of peonies. Like they're very strongly scented. But what you're saying is true. Like I once had a commission for like a 6-foot tall peony painting, like covered in peonies. And I obviously that was an enormous outload of work. And the person's like, it's not how I imagined it. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but that's what you commissioned and that's what it is. And like I just painted a 6-foot painting for you. Like I don't know what you want me to do. Right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's just
I just want one 6-foot peony.
Just one. Yeah. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that was, but the good news is that I did all the studies and then I copied those studies onto the 6-foot painting and then I could sell all the studies. But the more peonies I painted, the more they beget more peony commissions. I made my living.
I'm eating, but is it worth it?
Oh.
Yeah. So I did make my living purely as a painter for those 2 years, which was one of my missions and one of my goals in life. But then I realized A, that I really missed teaching, and B, that the peony life wasn't for me. So.
Not after 2 years. Nobody wants peonies for 2 years.
I think to make a living with my art, I've always had to do everything. I had to teach and I had to do the shows and to sell the work and stuff. And then I had to paint, and then a lot of times pick up, like you said, waitressing, did a lot of that to pay the bills and everything, but I didn't have to paint peonies.
Maybe it was a good learning point in my life.
Well, you did the matting too, right? I mean, you'd have to cut
framing and matting and
all the matting.
Yeah, Terri framed and matted that.
And let's see, ran two different studios, and just so it takes like for my life, it took every outlet in the whole, the whole community or umbrella of art. To put food on the table, to make sure it was coming in fairly steady. And it meant doing a lot of things that you don't like to do, like as like your what'd you call it?
Peonies. Well, I think the one thing I really learned from that is you have to be really mindful about how you craft your art career, because had I not accepted those commissions, I probably would have been painting something that made me happier to paint and may have missed opportunities to be painting, something that was more aligned with my vision and what I wanted to. But I was afraid, of losing these commissions at the start of my career. I just graduated from the atelier, trying to figure things out. But I think there's a business lesson in there too, that, whatever you commissions you get, or you're going to attract people that want similar things. So if you want to paint something different, you can't keep painting the same thing that you're doing. You have to at some point turn down those commissions and reach somewhere else.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, peonies pay the bills.
They do.
Yeah.
So they call them pot boilers in the atelier world. If you read diaries from other people that trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, like they talk about their pot boilers, like the things that sell that they paint. Sargent was famous for what he called and referred to in his journals as mugs. Like all those portraits of people, those were his pot boilers. He hated it. He couldn't stand it. He figured out a system where he could paint one whole painting a day, life size, just so that he could be done with it and get back to painting what he wanted to paint.
Yeah. But I had one art story. When I was in high school, I was in art class, and my friend and I on Win. The art teacher was so impressed with our work. She was like, "We're giving you this 8-foot tall canvas, and you're going to paint
a lot of canvas."
Yeah, you're going to paint a life-size image of an American Indian, because our school mascot were the Indians.
Oh, that's a little problematic these days.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah, this was 85.
But we did it,
and they're still the Indians.
Yeah, it's still the Indians.
Yeah,
Still
Norway
the
Indians.
Yeah.
I went to the same high school they did.
Well, long story short, it never went up in the gymnasium where she told us to promise that it was going to go, because it was not
probably for the best.
It was not as good.
As good as she had anticipated, and she didn't mention it. It just never happened.
Yeah. Well, as an art teacher, I can tell you that we get promised all sorts of things by admin officials that never come to fruition.
Yeah. It was a piece of trash, though.
When
I looked at
it sounds like you just needed to hone your skills a little, sir.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think I burned out. Didn't burn out, but I think I flamed out when I was about 6, because I was a pretty good little artist when I was a kid. I think Terri could attest to that. And then I was
but why do we let that go? Just because we age? It's because we feel like we don't have it. But if we had a little bit of coaching and knowledge to help us continue to grow in our drawing, I don't think we would lose it that way. It makes me so sad. If there's so many people out there that have this story that I used to love to draw and I lost it, but you still have that in you. You should let that out.
Well, I got into writing more. I like to write, but also Terri wasn't around as much, so that was a big part of it for me. This bonding with her.
But I do take all supplies with me.
I think you had to go to work.
You got 14 years on him. You moved.
Yeah. It's Terri's fault. It's Terri's fault.
That's right. It's Terri's fault. It's all Terri's fault.
It's not.
I blame mine on a. We didn't have an art teacher when I was in the I guess 2nd grade, and I very carefully drew C3PO.
Yes.
And the math teacher, who was observing as he called it, the art, said, "Oh, nice camel."
Oh. Okay. PSA to all the people, all the parents out there, all the adults that want to comment on a kid's drawing. There is only one appropriate thing to ever say to a child about their drawing, and that is, "Tell me about your drawing." Not, "Oh, nice cow. Oh, nice cat." No, never. Nix, nux, no. Do not do that.
Okay. That's good advice.
Tell me about your drawing. That's how you do it.
Artist's heart.
Yes.
No, my brother is the visual art type person. I am a wordsmith. And I'm okay with that. That's where my art goes, words. And decorating.
Yeah.
But he's the artist in the family.
See, I hate that phrase because it's not reserved for one person in the family.
No,
lots of people.
He's the one in the family who chose to be an artist.
There we go.
He's the one who chose art.
Well, in our family, we got Terri. We've got Michael. Michael's an artist.
Yep.
My brother Kenny is an artist. My mom was an artist.
Yep.
My aunt Rosemary was an accomplished artist. And
Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda.
So it's all around. It's all around us. So.
And Troy makes food art. He's a chef.
Yeah, he's a chef by trade.
He makes, if you see his face, he makes some beautiful food.
You mentioned Chris.
Gorgeous.
Right?
What's that, Aaron?
You mentioned Chris in there.
Chris?
Yes, Chris.
I don't think
she's she does more like anime style and that and like cartoon
It
type
might have been shorter to name the people in your family that don't do
art. Right.
Yes. Well, my brother's an aerospace engineer, but he still carves an epic pumpkin every year. Like,
I had this much influence. And art are like, I think science and art are this far apart.
Yeah.
That pumpkin carving is a skill.
I was about to ask Mandy if you're a good pumpkin carver. Yeah,
I'm a terrible pumpkin carver.
I know.
I don't have the precision and like the physics, and there's a 3D element there. Like I can never be a sculptress. I'm a 2D person. Like that third dimension just really confuses me.
My dad,
oils.
People would come from our old neighborhood just to see his pumpkins.
I'm going to tell my brother that and tell him he needs to up his game.
It's a challenge.
He needs to get people to come from more than a mile.
Okay. All right. I think he's up for it.
There's a double entendre in there somewhere that I don't want to go
to. Philip's mom, she does watercolors.
That's fun.
This is our Irish setter.
That's
I don't think I've ever seen that. I haven't seen a lot of paintings.
Yeah.
She did that when she was in the
when she was still living with us. No, when she was living with us.
She was working on that when I visited one time.
Yeah, that's super fun.
Yeah. And I mean, she
Lacey,
got all those nice elements.
That's Lacey, right? I couldn't think of the dog.
Yeah, that's Lacey. Yeah, if you want to grab Chala. We have one of a cat too that she did, and what it is my mom.
Is this the famous footprint cat?
Yeah,
that took the paint from the basement.
Yeah, this is the footprint cat. Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of cats.
Girl.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool! I wish that there were almost the footprints in the painting.
Yeah.
Mom didn't know the story.
She didn't know the footprint story. Yeah. And then she does more like landscape stuff. She did a lot of that when she was taking classes.
Terry comes to town, she can add footprints.
Huh?
When Terry comes to town, she can add footprints.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It'll be a mother-daughter confabulation. Collaboration. That's the word I couldn't quite find.
It's not her artwork anymore. It's ours.
It's a lot of syllables in collaboration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been a blast. I feel like we could go on longer, but we
don't want to take you past your voice comfort.
Yeah, but is there any we talked about the School of Atelier Arts.
You're so close.
So close. I'll let you say it again.
Atelier.
So it's the School of Atelier Arts. If you're just a little bit curious to learn more, you can join our newsletter for free at our homepage, schoolofatelierarts.com. If you are curious about atelier training and not sure if it's right for you, you can take our free diagnostic quiz, also on our homepage. And if you're like, yes, I want this yesterday, how do I get this training now? You can join the online class that I teach, where I critique 2 times a week and have the video lessons available.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
And
that URL is
at Mandy Fine Arts.
So my Instagram is at Mandy Fine Artist.
Artist.
Yes. And we also have a School of Atelier Arts handle on Instagram as well.
Excellent.
I'm gonna look into that. I enjoyed talking to you so much, and you've caught my interest in that.
Oh, thank you, Terri. I'm so glad that you were here and part of the conversation. I love art teachers so much. I'm always happy.
We have social.
Twitter.
Yeah, pod.
Instagram.
Yeah, pod.
Facebook.
Yeah, pod. So let us know. Hit us back. Have a great week.